Second marriage. I, currently 59, married a woman, 55, who had represented herself to be somewhat financially well off. As I had left my job with the Fed in order to marry and move away with her. Her mantra was that she was so well off financially, about low to mid seven figures, that it would not really require me to work full-time. Although I do have a flourishing avocational occupation, we had dated about a year before deciding to tie the knot and have subsequently been married for some 7+ years. A prenuptial agreement had been drawn up and signed prior to the wedding. She had kids from her previous marriage, as did I mine. I am proud to say, are very studious, ambitious, and educationally inclined, as they both are honor students. One at a major university and the other at a private school. Hers have always been lazy, being nothing more than problem students and dropouts, choosing to leave school in favor of embracing the drug culture, tattoo emporiums, law enforcement, and ultimately the judicial system. All have records for drug possession, with one having actually done time in county incarceration. She had never given me any notable information or explanation about her finances. Nor did I ever make that request, as I came to trust her implicitly. I felt that it was not really any of my business. Without hesitation, she was always gracious enough upon insisting that she pay for my kids' educational expenses to keep them from incurring any student loans. In December of 2010, a local girl who was in her early 20s, whom my STBXW knew as a contractor that she had employed from time to time, moved into our house at her insistence, and my relationship with my STBXW was headed south ever since. My STBXW said that she had invited this girl to move in because she really had nowhere else to live, and from that point in time, my STBXW had little to no time for me, staying on the road. So, in early March 2011, my STBXW came into my study to announce to me that she wanted a trial separation coinciding with my kids getting out of school for the spring semester. She intoned that she was now greatly concerned about her finances and could no longer afford to pay the tuition of my secondary school child. However, she said that she would steadfastly continue to financially support my college child with tuition, since she was an alumnus of the college that he attends as a student. She said that this trial separation, in effect, would allow us to communicate from afar, and that we could get together occasionally for a family meal at a local restaurant, allowing us to try to work things out between us. She thought that it would be best that I move to a locale about a half-hour away, to the city where my son's college and high school are located, supposedly to cut down on drive time and gasoline expenses. Now, I really do not know if this separation actually stemmed from the stock market heading south, in essence taking a lot of her wealth from her. But she made it abundantly clear that my spending habits, which were primarily for joint household living expenses, and mostly for food, gasoline, liquor for her, bills, pets, and livestock, were not what she wanted. By the same token, it was not uncommon for her to continue to lavish money on her own kids for cars, a separate residence of their own, insurance, tattoos, and to just be there for them whenever they needed to be bailed out of jail or needed money for any legal representation. She highly resented my informing her of whenever I happened to run across overt evidence of drugs, residue, or alcohol in the house that these minors of hers were bringing in, both with and without her knowledge. I haven't even mentioned the shady druggies that frequently came by to keep her kids company, and to obviously ply their wares. She wanted my college-age child to be told of the impending separation almost straight away, but absolutely did not want my secondary school child to have any knowledge of it until such time that he returned from his out-of-state class trip. This was done under the guise that she did not want to jeopardize his good grades, final exams, and class trip to cause him any worry and anxiety. She then physically helped to move the vast majority of our belongings out of the main house into our rent home some 30 miles away in another county where the kids and I now reside. The youngest child actually returned from his class trip and was taken to our new residence with little more than an awkward explanation from me. My STBXW initially did not want any of her family members to have any knowledge of the separation. I honored that, but later discovered that her family had ultimately learned about the separation from her. Since then, I have had virtually no contact with them as well. To date, there has not been as much as a telephone call from my STBXW in these nearly 9 months of separation, much less any of her extended family members. My kids both still think the world of her and have driven over to see her and her extended family members on several occasions, and she and my kids stay in touch via telephone and Facebook. But since she had us moved out, she will rarely send a text message or an email to me, and then it will only be geared toward business matters, like a bill or some pressing business matter. She randomly shows up at our residence without the slightest notice whenever she is in town, usually with boxes of our clothing or other belongings in tow. She is ultra cordial and talkative to my sons, but verbally will not give me the time of day. She is truly a physically beautiful woman, and when I see her, It can occasionally make me begin to long for her. But in my heart, I know all too well that there is absolutely nothing there but coldness anymore. Whenever I go back over to our old home to try to retrieve personal items, she gets quite defensive about my presence there without providing her with prior knowledge of my coming. My entire rationale is that if I did inform her of such, she would simply find a reason to either not be there or to answer the door. I still have a lot of my own family's furniture and antiques, all acquired through inheritance, still there, along with stored clothing and personal effects in the house and also in her warehouse. All too often, when I do show up, there is no one home, newspapers collecting on the front lawn, and the house is securely locked up. Upon my leaving, she took the liberty of removing the house key off of my key ring, but strangely enough, she let my sons retain theirs. I absolutely refuse to even try to enter the house when she is not there for fear of any possible legal ramifications. She travels both internationally and domestically rather frequently on trips designed to help her monitor her investments in the cities that she has them in. Trips to Asia, Europe, the Caribbean and Hawaii are not uncommon. In my marriage years, I never once was asked to accompany her on any of them, as she usually went with other friends and business associates of hers. I got to stay home and take care of things while she traveled. And since moving out, I am never informed of any of these trips by her, usually finding out about them from one of my kids. In early November, she came by late one night shortly after I had gone to bed. She brought over some boxes that the boys helped her bring into our house. Sometime the next afternoon, I also discovered a typed sheet of paper that she had discreetly placed listing some minor inventory items with attached monetary values of the goods that she had brought over that evening. Inside that folded paper was a sealed envelope with my name written in her handwriting on the front. After opening it up, I saw that it was a copy of a filed petition for divorce from our original home county where she resides. Although she left the copy of the petition for divorce, according to my attorney, that is still not deemed to be legal service in my state. So, until I legally receive proper service, my attorney advises doing nothing for the time being. My STBXW sent out an email in January asking if I had seen the legal letter that she left here. Upon advice of counsel, I was told to tell her that I had indeed seen it and was contemplating what steps that I might possibly take. But according to my attorney, that in no way implies legal service in Texas. It was not uncommon for her to call and invite the boys to her family gatherings such as Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve. The boys asked me if they could go, and I agreed that they might enrage her if they didn't, since she still throws money their way if they need it. My eldest is still having his college tuition and expenses largely subsidized by her, as well as supplying him with one of her vehicles to drive. He's fearful that if he doesn't stay in lockstep with her requests, that she could ultimately cut them both off. That hurts me nearly as much as my separation and impending divorce from her. On a very recent trip over to see her, she told the boys that she was leaving to take a Mardi Gras vacation in from Feb 11 through the 22nd. She told them that a friend was picking her up and driving them to I'm thinking that she is on a cruise out of up until the final days of Mardi Gras. I can't help but believe that during this entire episode since my moving out, that she has been busy seeing someone. She has changed her name on FB back to her name when I first met her. I've often thought that she might leak certain details on FB about her lifestyle that I could possibly put in my lawyer's hands. But since I do not do FB, that's really not an option. And even if I did, I think she'd restrict me in some way. The pain from all of this has caused me to greatly lose sleep, as I have only managed to average some 4 to 5 hours a night at best while trying to manage the living activities for my sons and me. I am primarily living off of my Fed retirement, as it's most difficult these days for a man in his late 50s to get the opportunity to re-enter the workforce, more especially in this downturned economy of ours. She has even intoned that I could live off of federal assistance, but I was quick to assert that since I was not yet even eligible for Social Security benefits, that wasn't even a remote possibility, since we are still deemed to be married in a community property state. Given all of this, I really can see no discernible hope for this marriage. My eldest child feels like he and his brother have been squarely placed between a rock and a hard place, in that if they truly vent their frustrations about the current state of affairs, that the proverbial money and tuition card would be pulled from them. So, they both try to empathize with me, but must remain quiet in the whole process of things. I still am having to foot the bill for my youngest son's private school tuition, which I don't mind doing at all. I have tried to immerse myself by becoming busy and joining a local church, but at times, the loneliness seems to get the better part of me. I'm also in the process of selecting a family counselor to have to bounce things off of, as I already have done with my pastor. I just wanted to share my rather lengthy story with you and see if any of you had any similar circumstances or ideas. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart if you've taken your time to read this far. Best of luck to you all, and may our Lord and Savior richly bless all of you. Comments. I'm sorry to say, but it looks like you were a novelty for her. And now the novelty has worn off. She basically bought you by dangling her wealth in front of your face, which led you to leave everything including a job. That would have been your major source of security. As a woman, and no matter how much money we make, we want a guy who will have the ability to assert himself by proving that he can take care of himself and us as well if everything goes south in our finances. I understand that she swept you off your feet, but that's mostly power trip. Which is wrong, any way you look at it. Now, her maintaining your children on her payroll is still some sort of power trip. He screwed you by ruining your life, but you have no other choice but to take it, because she still throws money your kids' way. It's a choice now whether you suck it up or do what is legally right. If so, I hope you have a very good lawyer who can at least get you a chunk of her wealth. Enough for you to live comfortably and support your children as well. It's cold, but it's all business now. OP responds, legally speaking, that's what the prenup was all about, and it should protect her, other than the willingly commingled assets. But in my heart of hearts, I really don't want 1 red cent of hers. Basically all that I truly desire is to get what possessions that rightfully belong to me out of her house. One of the biggest problems that I'm encountering right now is that I love the STBXW's extended family dearly. Mother, sister, and brother, cousins and friends. My sister-in-law texted me on Christmas Day and I replied back by text. No other contact from any of them to speak of, but I'd absolutely love to see all of them again, as I think they're laying low primarily out of embarrassment. I've often wondered if I should try to make contact with them at some point in time, albeit by phone call, email, or snail mail. Going through Valentine's Day yesterday was just as rough as Christmas, but I'm trying to get through them one day at a time. She's sole owner on the deed of the home as per the prenup. She took the liberty of removing my house key from my key ring when I was ordered out. If I should subsequently enter that dwelling without her express permission, then I could be construed as having broken and entered a felony offense here in Texas. She had promised on several occasions to deliver the balance of my belongings, but things got in the way, like it's too hot to move things or it's too cold to move things, so virtually nothing has happened. Also, our diamond wedding engagement ring set belonged to my now deceased mom and dad. I'd like to get her bands back, as they were family heirlooms handed down to me at their passing. I greatly fear that she'll want to hold on to them for their value. I want them, not for myself, but for either of my sons, when it comes time for them to marry. It appears that the only way I can get my things is going to be via a court order. I think the only thing I can hope for is that we can make her pay for my attorney's fees and all pertaining court costs. There will be no settlement, no contractual agreement on her part, as the prenup should totally insulate her. And even if it didn't, I would still feel rather dirty taking any money from her. My pastor recommends no initiating of contact with her family until such time that the legal proceedings reach some semblance of completion. I've already set up a counseling session, and definitely not with the one that I went to with my STBXW early last year. The strange thing here was, even in our final days together, provided she was home and not away on one of her many trips, she still allowed me to kiss her. And there were no arguments. In fact, we had sex up until about 5 weeks prior to my moving out. There had not been any arguments since a meltdown she had just prior to her declaring that trial separation. We were cordial, went about our business. A few days after the move out, she brought some things over to me, and being the affectionate guy that I am, I went to give her a kiss and got turned away quite coldly. I think that that's when reality finally set in and I saw that there was not going to be any kind of reconciliation. Not only was I right in that regard, but there has also been absolutely no telephonic communication from her. Maybe I wrongly assumed that I would let her be the one to open the door to call me, since she was the one who had abandoned me. I never felt compelled to call her, primarily because I just felt that I owed her nothing. In any event, if an EA ever took place, I feel that it was at some point after I was ordered out of the house. And if there's one going on now, I think she's keeping it pretty well under wraps. Have scheduled a meeting tomorrow afternoon with legal counsel, a fairly prominent family attorney, to get the ball rolling on my divorce countersuit. Sitting through church this morning was especially hard, hearing about the power of forgiveness. In my heart, I, as a Christian man, must forgive my STBXW for this nearly 1 year unwarranted separation and cone of silence that she has brought about. Being the Christian woman that she is supposed to be, I can only hope and pray that time will truly convict her conscience for both her actions and inactions. I've wrestled with this long enough, and I feel that it's time that I start getting proactive in the legal arena. Both my pastor and my family counselor agree that it's definitely time to move on. Just needed to vent. We'll keep you all posted of any new developments. Thanks. She's sole owner on the deed of the home as per the prenup. She took the liberty of removing my house key from my key ring when I was ordered out. If I should subsequently enter that dwelling without her express permission, then I could be construed as having broken and entered a fence here in Texas. She had promised on several occasions to deliver the balance of my belongings, but things got in the way, like, it's too hot to move things or it's too cold to move things, so virtually nothing has happened. Also, our diamond wedding engagement ring set belonged to my now deceased mom and dad. I'd like to get her bands back as they were family heirlooms handed down to me at their passing. I greatly fear that she'll want to hold on to them for their value. I want them, not for myself, but for either of my sons, when it comes time for them to marry. It appears that the only way I can get my things is going to be via a court order. I think the only thing I can hope for is that we can make her pay for my attorney's fees and all pertaining court costs. Had meeting with attorney today and we got the ball rolling on accepting service of my STBXW's divorce petition. I guess that it's now just a matter of time before her attorney will see the answer that we filed. Maybe I can start getting a little more sleep at night now. Yesterday morning, my STBXW broke the 9-month cone of silence and called me, jumping my case about some money movements I made within my bank account. I told her to back the truck up a second as I explained the situation. She then, if you can believe this, asked why it was that I had stayed silent over this span of time and not offered any kind of substantive plan of attack with her for reconciliation. My response was that since I was put out on the side of the road like some kind of a stray dog, I didn't feel that one was in order. And if I did, it would do me absolutely no good. She then started in on me as to why I had retained legal counsel, since she had filed the original petition for divorce, and that she and her attorney was going to give me a more than equitable settlement. My stock answer was that I needed legal representation as well and wanted someone there to look out for my interests. I applauded her for taking the initiative to pick up the phone to call me after all these months, telling her that I had started believing that she had emotionally detached herself from me and had found someone else more suitable to her liking. Her response was that the only person that had courted her was misery, and I jokingly told her that I think that same person had been to my house a few times too. I told her that since she exercised the initiative to finally make contact with me, I would extend the olive branch and wanted her to make a plan to go back into IC then MC with me, with each of us drawing up a list of expectations of the other and then attempting to iron things out before the counselor. Told her that I still loved her but didn't like what she had done. She said that in her heart, she felt like maybe we really loved each other, but didn't need to be married to each other, but that she would have to consider it, saying that she would get around to giving me an answer later. I followed that up with a very long letter to her last night accepting the blame for some of her troubles but also reiterated my verbal stance from the earlier telephone conversation. She, as of this moment, still has not replied to the letter or has called me back. My attorney said that she would temporarily suspend activity on the filing other than making an answer to the STBXW's original petition. I'm still somewhat leery of holding out a lot of hope, in that statistically, the longer a separation goes on, the more diminished the chances are for any genuine reconciliation. To that end, should I just set a definitive time frame on the receipt of an answer from her on my verbal proposal, and then go full steam ahead? Or do you really think that she might be just buying time for some unknown reason and just playing me along, with no deadline of any kind given to my STBXW? I just got an email reply from her very early this morning to effect of absolutely no reconciliation. STBXW went on to call me a thief for my moving of money in my bank account to help pay for bills and whatnot. She also attached a 6-year spreadsheet alleging that the amount that I now owed her for everything over the course of our 7+ year marriage, by her own estimates as being in the neighborhood of some 250 Kelvin. I knew that she had been concerned about her financial status, but I had absolutely no idea that the meter had been running on me for the duration of our marriage and even into the present. I greatly am beginning to feel as if there was never any love in her heart for me, even at the outset, but rather only a love for her financial status. I can only hope that she, in time, will come to re-establish her relationship with Christ and truly place priority on the more important things in life. More especially love. I both love her and feel sorry for her simultaneously. But with the absence on her part to even vaguely want to begin work on the fostering of communication in the reconciliatory process, and coupled with her statement saying that reconciliation is not an option for her, I've asked my attorney to move on ahead with the divorce proceedings and with all deliberate speed. And yes, I'm definitely in IC and I'm forwarding everything to my attorney, my pastor, as well as to my IC. Please continue to stay in prayer for us, guys. Having extended the olive branch to her and making a proposition trying to get her to agree to start joint verbal dialogue before our IC, MC, and after she stated verbally that she would consider it, less than 18 hours later, I received an email from my STBXW, stating that reconciliation was not even a remote possibility, along with a copy of the proposed final decree of divorce attached that her attorney had drawn up for her. She also proposed letting me off of the hook by paying her only 60 Kelvin of the allegedly owed 250 Kelvin, by her own figures. That could be paid to her in monthly increments with 6% interest. Quite frankly, by summer, I could well be very close to being financially insolvent. Is being poor any kind of a defense to being raked over the coals of a prenup? She seems wanting to get this done ASAP. Some third-party friends, acquaintances thought that she had wreaked financial havoc on her first husband that she divorced as he was quite wealthy. Now that she married what amounts to be a poor man by comparison in me, it would appear that she's using the prenup as the same modus operandi. I've always heard of black widows before, but could there really be another variety of arachnid aptly called a green widow? A month later, spring break, got both boys home and everything was very pleasant until oldest one got back from a side trip to see the STBXW. He had actually taken his little brother to visit a college in a nearby county, then the side trip to STBXW's home. And he came home somewhat moody, mildly blaming me for everything. We got into a mild argument, and out of anger, I told him that he appeared to be taking sides with his stepmom. His response was something to the effect of, well, that's better than taking sides with some of the locals opposed to her. I also discovered that she had sent him home with one of my mantel clocks. It's beyond heartbreaking to have my own son now seemingly turning against me and giving me the silent treatment. And to add insult to injury, earlier this AM, I was astonished to discover that STBXW, who is supposedly financially well-heeled, took the liberty of transferring some 15,000 out of my bank account. Accounts tied together. And into hers. It's really starting out as being the beginning of a terrible day. Update. Had to travel to old hometown earlier today for a church-related function with two good friends from my local church. Spent the afternoon at a convocation there, having dinner at a local eatery there. Following dinner, we toured the town, passing by the big home that STBXW and I lived in. She's still there. And it pretty much broke my heart. Not exactly from missing her, though. Saw STBXW's vehicle parked in the driveway along with another unidentified vehicle parked street side. The grass had been allowed to grow up in excess of 18 inches tall. I mean, the place looked like it was being readied for Halloween. I know she has a riding tractor mower as well as a self-propelled mower to do the upkeep with. And it just literally rips my heart out to see the place in that obvious state of dishevelment. I don't know if she has let it get in that shape due to depression or what, but I understand that she still stays gone from home a great deal. So, I really don't know what the problem might be. Update. Learned secondhand from youngest son that STBXW is taking off for a 3-week vacation somewhere on the East Coast. Left yesterday. She gave my 18-year-old son permission to stay in her house with her recently acquired 21-year-old lady ranch hand attendant from Europe. Can't say that I'm wild about that. Then my son informs me that he is going skydiving with one of STBXW's convict kids who was arrested for possessing and doing drugs and whatnot. And crap hit the fan. Son told me that he was going no matter what, and further told me that just because I hated STBXW and her kids didn't mean that he didn't like them. I told him I didn't want him running around with dopeheads like STBXW's kids were and demanded that he not go with them. If he wanted to go with a church, youth, or academic group who shows responsibility, then I might reconsider it. I asked if STBXW was paying for it, and he said no. That he was? I told him that money would be better used for his academics at college this fall. And I got the old "it's my money, I'll do as I please" response. I then told him that if he went, that I'd cut him off and would have some influence on him possibly losing his summer job over it. In addition to threatening him with moving back home with his natural mother, he said it made no difference, that he was going, no matter what. I talked to my oldest son, who agreed with me and offered to counsel his little brother. He told him he should use better judgment in who to associate with and that my STBXW's kids were not the type. Don't know if I came down too hard on him, but he was mad at me for the duration of yesterday but has been in a rather pleasant mood this morning. On another note, a mutual friend of mine, an STBXW who does FB, alerted me that there was a photo posting in her montage of a couple shot with her and the OM lovingly posing next to each other back in February over in New Orleans during Mardi Gras. This was a friend and co-worker of STBXW's now deceased husband and hers. I now remember having met this guy back in early 2011 when he came to town to pay her a visit in our home under fairly innocent pretenses. He wasn't there even an hour as she was busy showing him our historical home while I remained busy working in the study. FYI, her FB marital status is still listed as divorced, as it has been for a little better than a year now. The sad fact of the matter is that we haven't even had our first scheduled hearing in court yet. Well, anyway, it was just weeks later after these guys' initial visit when she asked me for the trial separation. I think that I've been doing relatively well preparing for the eventuality of court, and I also know that I've, and with a lot of success, done the 180 on her. And, obviously, she on me? But after having seen that photo and making the associations, it really just rips my heart out and makes me want to lose faith in mankind. The present prenup would pretty much place me out on the street with a meager 401k, my inherited family's antique furniture and jewelry, and personal clothing and belongings. Now STBXW used my mom and dad's diamond-studded wedding rings as well as my mom's diamond solitaire that I inherited from their estate. She hasn't quite yet seen fit to part with those. Under Texas property division rules, if I inherit anything, it would be off-limits to STBXW, just as her personal property would be off-limits to me. My conception of a prenup, if you will, has always been that its primary purpose is to keep the poorer wedding partner from laying claim to the wealthier partner's assets. In addition to that, STBXW seemingly is using it to try to feather her own nest by trying to suck blood out of a turnip bank that has no real literal funding. Had a very good visit with cell phone company tonight at their local store. They were able to produce cell phone records on STBXW as far back as 6 months from the date she closed her section of her cell phone account in my name. I was told that I can go back even farther, but to do so, I must call the national toll-free customer service phone number and make that request there. Anyway, in that litany of both incoming and outgoing cell phone calls, 2 phone numbers seem to predominate. Now all I really need to do is to identify the owner of those accounts, who no doubt will be the OM. The cell carrier also gave me her texting usage, and it was, in their terminology, abnormally heavy. This firm informed me that they do keep an archive of all text messages. But in order to get them, an attorney must present the request for such, and has to be signed off on by the presiding judge of the court. As is, her settlement is for me to pay her some $68K of the $250K that she alleges that I owe her for my share of the usage her money over the 7 years of our marriage. My attorney won't even dignify giving her lawyer a response because it is so ridiculous, thus keeping her side in suspense over what is actually going on over in our camp. A good friend of mine echoed his sentiments that STBXW doesn't even have a clue about what information about her that we now have, and that when my attorney throws her cell phone call records down on STBXW's attorney's desk, wishing him absolutely the very best in defending them in court, that he's going to go limp, primarily because she isn't being totally honest with him about all of her activities as well as the facts of the case. As is, we may be able to possibly win a small settlement in addition to STBXW paying all of my legal fees if she wants out. Notwithstanding, we'll just try to see if we can break the prenup and go after a community property division. She would not want to endure a trial in that small conservative rural one-horse county, where cheaters are despised as our most wealthy litigants. Once divorce is final, I'm greatly looking forward to sitting down with STBXW's brother, with the cell phone log in hand along with some other data, and letting him see for himself who it is that is at fault in this matter. I'm sure she has said things to her family that might sully my reputation, and I feel that letting the patriarch of their family know the facts of this case, that it would greatly offer some vindication and closure to me and perhaps restore some of my good reputation back to me. Update. I finally received STBXW's 2010 cell phone logs from the cell phone carrier. After close examination, her E with OM-1 began no later than March 2010, with other data retrieved that indicated overnight trips to his city by May of that same year, which is when the PIA likely started. One episode is so painful, I can't even bring myself to relate it to you all. Mind you, I'm holding down the fort at this time, richly and lovingly doing all of the household and farming duties that were assigned to me, and not having the remotest clue about her hormonal escapades. At that time, she'd be gone from home, come back, and then to avoid any suspicion, she'd literally throw me in the bed and haul my ashes to hell and back. I just never had a clue. In November, she also had a long talk fest with this guy while she was away in Hawaii on business. She barely had time to communicate with me, but she ran up triple-digit minute phone calls to him, both going out and coming in. November is also notable because that is when OM-2 started his FB activity with her and started phoning her. It's also when she sent me an email asking me what it was that I liked about her and to try to convey that to her upon her return. Interesting. I'm still awaiting the cell phone records from January 2011 through April, when STBXW's FB activity and her travel activity to his city was quite prevalent with both of the OM. I'm glad that I now know, but it makes me feel totally rotten. All I can do is accumulate, evaluate, digest, and get it ready to forward to my attorney. Hope something breaks soon, as there's no activity presently transpiring in the legal arena right now. Almost a year later, STBXW's lawyer submitted their latest rendition of the final decree of divorce. In it, they have requested that I procure a life insurance policy on myself for $100K to be in force for a period of 20 years. Whereby STBXW would be the sole beneficiary, and provided that she predeceased me, then the proceeds of that policy would go to my sons. In either case, I would have to pay the premiums on such a policy. Now can you even imagine what the monthly premiums are on such a policy on a 60-year-old man who will be paying them up until he reaches the ripe old age of 80? They are totally astronomical. One of my very good friends said that by letting her have the possibility of insurance proceeds from me would be tantamount to putting a large bullseye on my back. And that's even if I relented and gave her permission to buy such a policy on her own. Well, my learned legal counsel advised striking the entire clause, which is the course of action that we took. In yet another clause, she also wanted to claim the dependency exemption for my oldest son, since STBXW had given him financial aid in college. We also struck that clause, since that he is now over the age of majority. That would be something that he would have to do, and certainly not me. In essence, it shows that she is either in the market to cash in on her perceived financial losses from the marriage, or that she is wanting to do this to openly seek to cause emotional turmoil. Knowing that I don't have the financial well-being and resources to fight this from a legal perspective, not nearly as much as she is. Our reply and counter decree goes out next week, so we'll just have to sit back, then wait and see what transpires next. About 6 months later, hearing commenced at about 10:30 a.m. Prior to the hearing, judge asked me and opposing counsel to step outside the courtroom and see if a settlement could be reached. I talked to him and he indicated that STBXW's procurance of life insurance policy on me was the only real thing holding the divorce up, along with a token amount of $300. I told him that I wanted counsel to look over the case since original counsel chose to vacate. When the hearing resumed, the judge denied my motion for continuance on the grounds that the date on the file was over 2 years old, and that I'd had plenty of time to get counsel, and just went straight into the bench trial, announcing that since a prenup was involved, we would be conducting the trial as a no-fault hearing. Her attorney called her to the stand and together painted me as a deadbeat who was greatly living off of her wealth. There was little that I could cross-ex her on since my original attorney had not released any of my records to me. Judge ruled in favor of letting her have the 150 Kelvin insurance policy on me, and conversely told me that I could take one out on her as well. Judge negated the monetary amount sought and likened it to quibbling. Divorce summarily granted. XW gets to change her name back to maiden name, and I have been ordered to sign off on the life insurance with XW. It's so good to finally say that. Paying the premiums. Judge asked me if I had any problem with life insurance policy, and I expressed that it was tantamount to receiving blood money. Judge acknowledged knowing where I was coming from and ordered successor beneficiaries on the policy. The judge assured me that if something indeed did happen to me, that several law enforcement agencies would summon by the insurance carrier to be on her doorstep pronto, in the event of my demise. The judge also reminded her that the life insurance premiums on a 61-year-old man was not going to be cheap and may well make procuring such a policy ill-affordable or basically just declare me uninsurable. So, in essence, I get my personal belongings and debts, XW retains hers, so I pretty much walk away with the shirt on my back. Well, just found out from XW's FB postings that right after the final divorce hearing on Monday, that she wasted little time afterward as she took off for Atlanta to do some heavy partying and celebrating with her old college GF there. Also, there is some speculation that XW's reported new flame from Australia has hooked up with them all there. It would seem that XW ain't exactly letting the worm get far off of the person before she's ready to start shoveling dirt on his face. 1.5 years later, just received a phone call from my college senior son who relayed news to me of my rich, skanky XW's announcement of her pending engagement to her live-in BF. It seems that she called my son to gently break the news to me, not wanting me to suffer irreparable shock from finding out all about it on FB. I informed him that anything that woman does is not a surprise to me. I'll give the guy no more than 5 years to tire of the same things I did, or rich, skanky XW will tire of repetition in the boudoir, and will then seek out conjugal pleasure on road trips, to see the same or other BF hookups that she's made on FB. After all, she's got a rich track record of cheating around on all of her husbands, living or not. One last thing, darling, make good and sure that husband know. 3 properly inks the prenup. If he needs help with finding out where to sign, just send him on over and I'll be more than thrilled to show him exactly where. 3.5 years later, final update. Dating a fairly committed Methodist girl, started out as a Baptist, though, from the Austin area now, and she's pretty good. She's an ex-RN and a current academic nursing professor. She's only a month younger than me. Now what it is that she sees in me, I'll never begin to know. But I love her presence because she's got a loving personality. Is well-educated, worldly, has 2 grown kids, and doesn't seem to act afraid of bedroom time. Although we haven't quite gone there yet. My comment. You guys enjoyed this full story. There are plenty of stories with full endings in this channel, you just need to go through them. Some people like to post their endings, some don't. Do you have a good ending to your relationships? Let me know down below. Sub and bell, and I need to get back to the gym.